Mr. President, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you at a very important moment, because the President of the United States will address the nation this week. And as you know, important conversations are taking place in Washington, and important things are happening here in your country. Do you expect an airstrike?
As long as the United States doesn't obey the international law and trample over the Charter of the United Nations, we have to worry that any administration, not only this one, would do anything. But according to the lies that we've been hearing for the last 2 weeks from high-ranking officials in this administration, we have to expect the worst.
Are you prepared?
We've been living in difficult circumstances for the last 2 years and a half, and we prepare ourselves for every possibility. But that doesn't mean if you're prepared, things would be better. It's going to get worse with any foolish strike or stupid war.
What do you mean worse?
Worse because of the repercussions, because nobody can tell what the repercussion of the first strike, or you're talking about one region, bigger region. It's not only about Syria, it's interlinked region, it's intermingled, interlocked, whatever you want to call it. If you strike somewhere, you have to expect the repercussions somewhere else in different forms, in a way that you don't expect.
Are you suggesting that if in fact there's a strike, there would be repercussions against the United States from your friends in other countries like Iran or Hezbollah or others?
Yeah, as I said, it may take different forms, direct and indirect. Direct when people want to retaliate, or governments. Indirect when you're going to have instability and the spread of terrorism all over the region that will influence the West directly.
Have you had conversations with Russia, with Iran, with Hezbollah about how to retaliate?
We don't discuss this issue as a government, but we discuss the repercussions, which is more important because sometimes repercussions could be more destroying than the strike itself. Any American strike will not destroy as much as the terrorist has destroyed in Syria. So sometimes repercussions could be many doubles the strike itself.
But some have suggested that it might tip the balance in the favor of the rebels and lead to the overthrow of your government.
Exactly. Any strike will be as direct support to Al-Qaeda offshoot that's called al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. You're right about this. It's going to be direct support.
This is about chemical warfare, and let's talk about that. Do you approve of the use of chemical warfare? Do you think that it is an appropriate tool of war to use chemical?
We are against any WMD, any weapons of mass destruction, whether chemical or nuclear. And
so you're against the use of chemical warfare?
Yeah, it's not only me. As a state, as a government, in 2001, we proposed to the United Nations a proposal to empty or to get rid of every WMD in the Middle East, and the United States stood against that proposal. So this is our conviction and policy.
But you're not a signatory to the chemical warfare
Not yet.
agreement.
Not
Why
yet.
not?
Because Israel has WMD and it has to sign, and Israel occupying our land. So that's why we talked about Middle East, not Syria, not Israel. It should be comprehensive.
Do you consider chemical warfare equivalent to nuclear warfare?
I don't know, we haven't tried either.
Yeah, but you know, you're a head of state and you understand the consequences of
Do you mean
weapons that don't discriminate,
technically
that
they're
are
not
beyond.
Yeah, technically they're not the same, but
But-
morally it's the same.
Morally, they're the same.
They have the same, but at the end, killing is killing.
And it's
Mass killing
indiscriminate.
is mass killing.
Yes.
Sometimes you may kill tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands with very primitive armaments.
Then why do you have such a stockpile of chemical weapons?
We don't discuss this issue in public because we never said that we have it, and we never said that we don't have it. It's a Syrian issue, it's a military issue we never discussed in public with anyone.
This is from the New York Times this morning. Syria's leaders amassed one of the world's largest stockpiles of chemical weapons with help from the Soviet Union and Iran, as well as Western European suppliers, and even a handful of American companies, according to American diplomatic cables and declassified intelligence records. You have amassed one of the largest supplies of chemical weapons in the world.
To have or not to have is a possibility, but it depends on what the media say is nonsense. Or to depend on some of the reports of the intelligence is nonsense, and that has proven when they invaded Iraq 10 years ago, and they said Iraq has stockpile of WMD, and it was proven after the invasion that was false. It was fraud. So we cannot depend on what one magazine wrote. But at the end, I said it's not something not to be discussed with anyone.
You accept that the world believes you do have a stockpile of chemical weapons.
Who?
The world.
We
the
didn't
United
discuss
States and other powers who also have chemical weapons.
It's not about what they believe in, it's about what the reality that we have. And this reality, we own it. We don't have to discuss it.
Speaking of reality, what was the reality on August 21st? What happened in your judgment?
We're not in the area where the alleged chemical attack was happened, as it alleged. We're not sure that anything happened.
Even at this date, you are not sure that chemical weapons, even though you have seen the videotape, even though you've seen the bodies, even though your own officials have been there.
I haven't finished. Our soldiers in another area were attacked chemically. Our soldiers. They went to the hospital as casualties because of chemical weapons. But in the area where they said the government used chemical weapons, we only had video and we only have pictures and allegations. We're not there. Our forces, our police, our institutions don't exist. How can you talk about what happened if you don't have evidences? We're not like the American administration. We're not social media administration or government. We are the government that deal with reality.
Well,
when we have evidences, we will announce.
Well, as you know, Secretary Kerry has said there is evidence that they saw rockets that fired from a region controlled by your forces into a region controlled by the rebels. They have evidence from satellite photographs of that. They have evidence of a message that was intercepted about chemical weapons, and that soon thereafter there were other intercepted messages. So Secretary Kerry has presented what he concludes is conclusive evidence.
No, he presented his confidence and he presented his convictions. It's not about confidence, it's about evidence. The Russians have completely opposite evidence that the missiles were thrown from area where the rebels control. That reminds me about what Kerry said, about the big lie that Colin Powell said in front of the world on satellites about the WMD in Iraq before going to war. When he said, this is our evidence, actually he gave false evidence. In this case, Kerry didn't even present any evidence. He talked, we have evidence, and he didn't present anything. Not yet, nothing so far.
Well, the United...
not single shred of evidence. Yeah.
Do you have some remorse for those bodies, those people? It is said to be up to at least 1,000 or perhaps 1,400 who were in Eastern Ghouta who died.
We feel pain for every Syrian victim.
But what about victims of this assault from chemical warfare?
Dead is dead. Killing is killing. Crime is crime. When you feel pain about their family, about the loss that you have in your country. Whether one person killed, or 100, or 1,000. It's a loss. It's a crime. It's a moral issue. We have family that we sit with, family that they love their dear ones. It's not about how they killed. It's about they are dead now. This is the bad thing.
Has there been any remorse or sadness on behalf of the Syrian people for what happened?
I think sadness prevails in Syria now. We don't feel anything else but sadness because we have this killing every day, whether chemical or whether with any kind. It's not about how. We feel with it every day.
But this was indiscriminate, and children were killed, and people who said goodbye to their children in the morning didn't see them and will never see them again.
You mean which
in Ghouta.
In Ghouta?
Yes.
That's the case every day in Syria. That's why we have to stop the killing. That's why we have to stop the killing. But what indiscriminate you're talking about? You said
well, the fact that chemical warfare is indiscriminate in who it kills.
Do you have evidence that there was
innocents as well as combatants?
Yeah, but you're not talking about evidence now. You're not talking about facts. We are talking about allegation. So we're not sure that if there's chemical weapon used and who used it. We cannot talk about virtual thing. We have to talk about facts.
It is said that your government delayed the United Nations observers from getting to Ghouta, and that you denied and delayed the Red Cross and the Red Crescent from getting there to make observations and to help?
The opposite happened. Your government delayed because we asked for delegation in March 2012 when the first attack happened in Aleppo in the north of Syria, and they delayed it till just a few days before Al-Ghouta when they sent those team. And the team itself said in his letter, in his report, that he did everything as he wanted. There was not a single obstacle.
But they have said they were delayed in getting there. They wanted to be there earlier.
No. There was a conflict. There was fighting. There was shooting. That's it. We didn't prevent them from going anywhere. We asked them to come. Why to delay them? Even if you want to take the American story, they say we used the chemical weapons the same day the team or the investigation team came to Syria. Is it logical? It's not logical. Even if a country or army wanted to use such weapons, he should have waited a few days till the investigation finished its work. It's not logical. The whole story doesn't even hold together.
We'll come back to it. If your government did not do it, despite the evidence, who did it?
We have to be there to get evidences, like what happened in Aleppo when we have the evidences. And because the United States didn't send the team, we then send the evidences to the Russians.
But don't you want to know the answer if you don't accept the evidence so far as to who did this?
The question, who threw chemical missiles the same day on our soldiers? That the same question. Definitely not the soldiers. Soldiers doesn't throw missile on themselves. So either the rebels, the terrorists, or third party. We don't have any clue yet. We have to be there to collect the evidence, then we can give answer.
Well, the argument is made that the rebels don't have the capability of using chemical weapons. They do not have the rockets and they do not have the supply of chemical weapons that you have, so therefore they could not have done it.
No, first of all, they have rockets, and they've been throwing rockets on Damascus for months.
That carry chemical weapons?
Rockets,
right.
Rockets in general. They have the means, first. Second, the sarin gas that they've been talking about for the last 2 weeks is very primitive gas. You can have it done.
Sarin gas?
Sarin gas. You can have it done in the backyard of a house. It's very primitive gas. So it's not something complicated.
But this was not primitive. This was a terrible use of chemical weapons.
Third, they used it in Aleppo in the northern of Syria. Fourth, there's video on YouTube where the terrorists clearly make trial on a rabbit and kill the rabbit and said, this is how we're going to kill the Syrian people. Fifth, there's a new video about one of those women who they consider as a rebel or fighter or whatever, work with those terrorists, and she said they didn't tell us how to use and that use the chemical weapons, and one of those weapons exploded in one of the tunnels and killed 12. That's what she said. Those are the evidences that we have. Anyway, the party who accused, he's the one who has to bring evidences. The United States accused Syria, and because they accused, you have to bring evidence. This, first of all. We have to find evidences when we are there as government.
What evidence would be sufficient for you?
What evidence?
Would be sufficient? What evidence would prove the case for you?
For example, in Aleppo, we had the missile itself, and the material, and the sample from the sand, from the soil, and the sample from the blood.
But the argument is made that your forces bombarded Ghouta soon thereafter with the intent of covering up evidence.
Okay, how could bombardment cover the evidence? Technically, it doesn't work. How? This is stupid, to be frank. This is very stupid.
But you acknowledge the bombardment.
Of course, there was fight. That happened every day. Now you can have it. But let's talk. They have indications. Let me just finish this point, because how can you use WMD while your troops only 100 meters away from it? Is it logical? It doesn't happen. It cannot be used like this. Anyone who's not military knows this fact. Why do you use chemical weapons while you're advancing? Last year was much more difficult than this year, and we didn't use it.
There is this question too. If it was not you, does that mean that you don't have control of your own chemical weapons, and that perhaps they are falling into the hands of other people who might want to use them?
That implies that we have chemical weapons first.
Yes.
That implies that it's being used second. So we cannot answer this question until we answer the first part and the second part. Third, let's presume that a country or army have these weapons. These kind of armaments cannot be used by infantry, for example, or by anyone. This kind of armament should be used by specialized units. So it cannot be in the hand of anyone.
Well, exactly, and that's the point.
Which is controlled centrally.
So you were saying that if, in fact, your government did it, you would know about it and would have approved it.
I'm talking about general case.
Okay,
everywhere
but generally
in the
you're
world.
saying, if in fact it happened, I would have known about it and approved it.
Generally.
That's the nature of centralized power.
In every country, yes. And we are part of every country. I'm talking about the general rules. Because I cannot discuss with this point with you in details unless I'm telling you what we have and what we don't have. Something I'm not going to discuss, as I said at the very beginning. Because this is a military issue that could not be discussed.
Do you question the New York Times article I read to you? Saying that you had a stockpile of chemical weapons? You're not denying that?
No, we don't say yes, we don't say no, because as long as it's classified, it shouldn't be discussed, whether yes or not.
The United States is prepared to launch a strike against your country because they believe chemical weapons are so abhorrent that anybody who uses them crosses a red line, and that therefore, if they do that, they have to be taught a lesson so that they will not do it again.
What red line?
A red line of the use of chemical weapons against your own people.
Who drew it?
The president says it was not just him, that the world has drawn it in their revulsion against the use of chemical weapons, that the world has drawn that red line.
It's not the world, because Obama drew that line, and Obama can draw a line for himself and for his country, not for other countries. We have our red lines, like our sovereignty and our independence. While if you want to talk the world red lines, United States used uranium-depleted uranium in Iraq, Israel used white phosphorus in Gaza, and nobody said anything. What about the red lines? We don't see red lines. It's political red lines.
The president is prepared to strike, and perhaps will get the authorization of Congress or not. The question then is, would you give up chemical weapons if it would prevent the president from authorizing a strike? If that is a deal you would accept.
Again, you always imply that we have chemical weapons.
I have to, because that's the assumption of the president. That is his assumption, and he is the one who will order the strike.
It's his problem if he has an assumption. But for us in Syria, we have principles. We'll do anything to prevent the region from another crazy war. It's not only Syria, because it will start in Syria.
You'll do anything to prevent the region from having another crazy war.
Yes.
You recognize the consequences for you if there is a strike.
It's not about me. It's about the region.
Well, it's about your country. It's about your people.
Of course. My country and me, we are part of this region. We're not separated. You cannot discuss it as Syria or as me. It should be as part, as a whole, as comprehensive. That's how we have to look at it.
Some ask, why would you do it? It's a stupid thing to do if you're going to bring a strike down on your head by using chemical weapons. Others say you do it because A, you're desperate, or in the alternative, you do it because you want other people to fear you. Because these are such fearful weapons that if the world knows you have them, and specifically your opponents in Syria, the rebels, then you have gotten away with it and they will live in fear. And that therefore the president has to do something.
You cannot be desperate when the army is making advancement. That should have happened if we take into consideration that this presumption is correct and this is reality. You use it when you're in desperate situation. Our position is much better than before. So this is not correct.
You think you're winning the war?
I don't know what is. Winning is the subjective word. But we are making advancement. This is the correct word. Because winning for some people is when you finish completely, when you win completely.
And the argument is made that if you're winning, it is because of the recent help you've gotten from Iran and from Hezbollah and additional supplies that have come to your side. People from outside of Syria supporting you in the effort against the rebels.
Iran doesn't have any soldier in Syria. So how could Iran help me?
Supplies, weaponry.
That's all before the crisis. We always have this kind of cooperation.
Hezbollah fighters have been here.
Hezbollah fighters on the
from
border.
Outside of the country.
Only on the border with Lebanon, where the terrorists attacked them. On the border with Lebanon, This is where Hezbollah retaliated, and this is where we have cooperation, and that's good.
Hezbollah forces are in Syria today.
On the border area with Lebanon, where they want to protect themselves and cooperate with us. But they don't exist all over Syria. They cannot exist all over Syria anyway, for many reasons. But they exist on the borders.
What advice are you getting from the Russians
About
this war, about how to end this war?
every friend of Syria is looking for peaceful solution. And we are convinced about that. We have this advice, and without this advice, we are convinced about it.
Do you have a plan to end the war?
Of course.
Which is?
At the very beginning, it was fully political. When you had these terrorists, the first part of the same plan, which is political, should start with stopping the smuggling of terrorists coming from abroad, stopping the logistic support, the money, all kind of supports coming to these terrorists. This is the first part. Second, you can have national dialogue where different Syrian parties sit and discuss the future of Syria. Third, you will have the interim government or transitional government.
So you would meet with rebels?
Then you'll have the final elections, parliamentary elections, and you're going to have the presidential election.
But the question is, would you meet with rebels today to discuss a negotiated settlement?
In the initiative that we issued at the beginning of this year, we said every party with no exceptions.
So
as long as they give up their armaments.
But you'll meet with the rebels and anybody who is fighting against you if they give up their weapons.
Yeah, we don't have problem at all.
But then they will say, you're not giving up your weapons, why should we give up our weapons?
Does the government give up its weapon? Have you heard about that before?
No, but rebels don't normally give up their weapons either during the negotiation. They do that after a successful...
The armament of the government is legal armament. Any other armament is not legal. So how can you compare? It's completely different.
There is an intense discussion going on about all the things we're talking about in Washington, where if there's a strike, it will emanate from the United States' decision to do this. What do you want to say in this very important week in America and in Washington to the American people, to members of Congress, to the President of the United States?
I think the most important part of this now is, let's say, the American people, but the polls show that the majority now don't want a war anywhere, not only against Syria. But the Congress is going to vote about this in a few days, and I think the Congress is elected by the people and represent the people and work for their interests. The first question that they should ask themselves, what do wars give America? Since Vietnam till now, nothing. No political gain, no economic gain, no good reputation. The United States is at all time, the credibility is at all-time low. So this war is against the interests of the United States. Why? First of all, because this is the war that's going to support al-Qaeda and the same people that kill Americans in the 11th of September. The second thing that we all want to tell to the Congress that they should ask, and that's what we expect. We expect them to ask this administration about the evidence that they have regarding the chemical story and allegations that they presented. I wouldn't tell the president or any other official because we were disappointed by their behavior recently because we expected this administration different from Bush's administration. They are adopting the same doctrine with different accessories. That's it. So we expect, if we want to expect something from this administration, is not to be weak, to be strong, to say that we don't have evidence, that we have to obey the international law, that we have to go back to the Security Council and the United Nations.
Question remains, what can you say to the president who believes chemical weapons were used by your government, that this will not happen again?
I will tell him very simply, present what you have as evidence to the public. Be transparent.
If he does?
If he does.
If he presents that evidence?
This is where you can discuss the evidence, but he doesn't have. He didn't present it because he doesn't have. Kerry doesn't have. No one in your administration have. If they had it, they would have presented it to you as media from the first day.
They have presented it to the Congress.
Nothing.
They
Nothing
have
was
shown the
presented.
Congress what they have and the evidence they have from satellites, intercepted messages, and the like.
Nothing
And
presented. Nothing has been presented so far.
they have presented it to Congress, sir.
You're a reporter. Get this evidences and show it to the public in your country.
They're presenting
We
it
dare
to
them.
they're presenting it to the public's representatives. You don't show your evidence and what you're doing and your plans to other people that within your own council. They're showing it to the people's representatives
So you want
who have to vote on an authorization to strike. And if they don't find the evidence sufficient,
First of all, we have the precedent of Colin Powell 10 years ago. When he showed the evidence, it was false and it was forged. This is first. Second, you want me to believe American evidence and don't believe the indication that we have. We live here. This is our reality.
your indications are that what?
Sorry?
What your indications are that it was
That the rebels or the terrorists used the chemical weapons in northern of Aleppo 5 months ago.
and on August 21st?
No. That was before. That
I
was
know.
in March. On the 21st, again, they used it against our soldiers in our area where we control it. And our soldiers went to the hospital, and you can see them if you want.
But the area where that attack took place was controlled by rebel forces.
That you're talking about the chemical attacks.
Yes.
Yeah, what if they have stockpiles and they exploded because of the bombardment? What if they use the missile by coincidence and attack themselves by mistake?
Let me
Not
talk.
by coincidence, by mistake.
Yes. Let me move to the question of whether a strike happens, and I touched on this before. You have had fair warning. Have you prepared by moving possible targets? Are you moving targets within civilian populations, all the things that you might have done if you have time to do that, and you have had clear warning that this might be coming?
Syria is in state of war since its land was occupied for more than 4 decades. And the nature of the frontier in Syria implies that most of the army is in inhabited area. Most of the centers are in inhabited area. You hardly find any military base in distant area from the cities unless it's airport or something like this. But most of the military bases or centers are within inhabited area.
Will there be attacks against American bases in the Middle East if there's an airstrike?
You should expect everything. You should expect everything. Not necessarily through the government. It's not only the governments are not the only player in this region. You have different parties, you have different factions, you have different ideology. You have everything in this region now. So you have to expect that.
Tell me what you mean by expect everything.
Expect every action.
Including chemical warfare?
That depends if the rebels or the terrorists in this region or any other group have it. It could happen. I don't know. I'm not fortune teller to tell you what's going to happen.
But we'd like to know more, and I think the president would like to know. American people would like to know. If there's an attack, what might be the repercussions and who might be engaged in those repercussions.
Before the 11th of September, in my discussions with many officials in the United States, some of them are congressmen, I used to say that don't deal with the terrorists as playing games. It's a different story. You're going to pay the price if you're not wise in dealing with the terrorists. So nobody expects, we said there are going to be repercussions of the mistaken way of dealing with it, of treating the terrorism. But nobody expected 11th of September. So you cannot expect, it's difficult for anyone to tell you what's going to happen. It's an area where everything is on the brink of explosion. You have to expect everything.
Let's talk about the war today. 100,000 people dead. 1 million refugees. A country being destroyed. Do you take some responsibility for that?
That depends on the decision that I took. From the first day I took the decision as president to defend my country. So who killed, that's another question. Actually, the terrorists have been killing our people since the beginning of this crisis 2 years ago, 2.5 years. And the Syrian people wanted the government and the state institutions and the army and the police to defend them. And that's what happened. So talking about the responsibility, I took my responsibility according to the Syrian constitution that said we have to defend ourselves.
Mr. President, you constantly say it's terrorist. Most people look at the rebels and they say that al-Qaeda and other forces from outside Syria are no more than 15 or 20% of the forces on the ground. The other 80% are Syrians, are defectors from your government, and defectors from your military. They are people who are Syrians who believe that their country should not be run by a dictator, should not be run by one family, and that they want a different government in their country. That's 80% of the people fighting against you, not terrorists.
No, we didn't say 80%, for example, or the majority or the vast majority are foreigners. We said the majority, the vast majority are al-Qaeda or al-Qaeda offshoots organizations in this region. When you talk about al-Qaeda, it doesn't matter if he's Syrian or American or from Europe or from Asia or Africa. Al-Qaeda have one ideology and they go back to the same leadership in Afghanistan or in Syria or in Iraq. That's the question. You have tens of thousands of foreigners. That's definitely correct. We are fighting them on the ground, and we know this.
But that's 15 or 20% of this.
Nobody has real.
But that's a realistic look at how many?
20 or
15 to 20%.
No, I've said
fighters from outside.
Nobody knows because when they are dead and when they are killed, they don't have any ID. You look at their faces, they look foreigners, but where are they coming from? How precise this estimate is difficult to tell. But definitely the majority are al-Qaeda. This is what concerns us, not the nationality. If you have Syrian al-Qaeda or Pakistani al-Qaeda or Saudi al-Qaeda, what's the difference? What's the matter? The most important thing is that the majority are al-Qaeda. We never said that the majority are not Syrians. But we said the minority are what they call free Syrian army. That's what we said.
Do you believe this is becoming a religious war?
It started partly as a sectarian war. In some areas, but now it's not. Because if you talk about sectarian war or religious war, you should have very clear line between the sects and religions in Syria according to the geography and the demography in Syria, something we don't have. So it's not religious war, but al-Qaeda always use the religions, the Islam actually, as pretext and as a cover and as a mantle for their war and for their terrorism and for their killing and beheading and so on.
Why has this war lasted 2.5 years?
Because of the external interference, because there's an external agenda supported by, or let's say led by, the United States, the West, the petrodollar countries, mainly Saudi Arabia, and before was Qatar, and Turkey. That's why it lasted 2.5 years.
But what are they doing, those countries you cited?
Yeah, they have different agendas. For the West, they wanted to undermine the Syrian positions. For the petrodollar countries like Saudi Arabia, they think undermining Syria will undermine Iran on a sectarian basis. For Turkey, they think that if the Muslim Brotherhood take over the rest of the region, they will be very comfortable, they will be very happy, they will make sure that their political future is guaranteed. So they have different agendas and different goals.
But at the same time, as I said, you've used Hezbollah and you've gotten support from Iran, from Russia. So what's happening here? Is this a kind of war that exists because of support from outside Syria on both sides?
This is cooperation. I don't know what do you mean by support. We have cooperation with those countries for decades. Why to talk about this cooperation now?
But then you tell me, what are you receiving from Iran?
Political support
That's it?
And
No weapons,
every agreement,
no weapons,
every
no
agreement,
support, no...
No. We have agreements with many countries, including Iran, including Russia, including other countries, that it's about different things, including armaments. It's cooperation like any cooperation between any two countries, which is normal. It's not related to the crisis. You don't call it support. You call it because you pay money for what you get. So you don't call it support. It's cooperation. Call it whatever you want. But the word support is not precise. We from Russia, for example, we have political support, which is different from the cooperation. We have cooperation for 60 years now, but now we have political support, which is...
Well, but the Russians have said they have ongoing support for you beyond just political cooperation. I mean, they have treaties that existed with Syria.
Exactly.
And they provided all kinds of defensive weapons.
Yeah, you said the treaties, and you said, and the official, the Russian official said, we have not agreements, contracts that we have to fulfill. And those contracts, like any country, you buy armaments, you buy anything you want.
But do you believe this has become a conflict of Sunni versus Shia?
No, not yet. It's in the mind of the Saudis, in the minds of the Wahhabis.
In the minds of the Iranians?
No. They actually, what they are doing is the opposite. They try to open channels with the Saudi, with many other Islamic entities in this region in order to talk about Islamic society, not Sunni and Shia societies.
Was there a moment for you,
Yeah.
as you saw the Arab Spring approaching Syria, that you said, I've seen what happened in Libya. I've seen what happened in Tunisia. I've seen what happened in Egypt. It's not going to happen to Bashar al-Assad. I will fight anybody who tries to overthrow my regime with everything I have.
No, for one reason, because the first question that I ask, do I have public support or not? That's the first question that I ask as president. If I don't have the public support, whether there's what's the so-called Arab Spring, it's not spring anyway, but whether we have this or we don't, if you don't have public support, you have to quit, you have to leave. If you have public support in any circumstances, you have to stay. That's your mission. You have to help the people. You have to serve the people. I never said... Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
When you say public support, people will point to Syria and they say a minority sect, Alawites, control a majority Sunni population. And it's a dictatorship, and they do it because of force of their own instruments of power. That's what you have, not public support for this war against
now it's been
other Syrians.
Now it's been 2 years and a half, okay? 2 years and a half, and Syria is still withstanding against the United States, the West, Saudi Arabia, the richest country in this area, including Turkey. And taking into consideration what your question implies, that even the big part or the bigger part of the Syrian population against me, how can I withstand till today? I'm either superhuman or Superman, which is not the case.
Or you have a powerful army.
The army made of the people. It cannot be made of robots. It's made of people.
Surely you're not suggesting that this army is not at your will and the will of your family.
How can you? What do you mean by the will of the family?
The will of your family.
If
your brother is in the military. The military has been every observer of Syria believes that this is a country controlled by your family and controlled by the Alawites, who are your allies. That's the control.
If that situation is correct, what you're mentioning, we wouldn't have withstand 40 years and a half. We would have disintegration of the army, disintegration of the whole institution in the states. We would have disintegration of Syria, if that's the case. It cannot be tolerated in Syria. I'm talking about the normal reaction of the people. If it's not national army, it cannot have the support, and if it doesn't have the public support of every sect, it cannot do its job and advance recently. It cannot be the army of the family doesn't make national war.
Some will argue that you didn't have the support because, in fact, the rebels were winning before you got the support of Hezbollah and enlarged support from the Iranians, that you were losing, and then they came in and gave you support so that you were able to at least start winning and produce at least a stalemate.
You know, the context is wrong, because talking about winning and losing is like if you're talking about two armies fighting on two territory, which is not correct. It's not the case. Those are gangs coming from abroad, infiltrated inhabited area, kill the people, take their houses, and shoot at the army. The army cannot do the same. Yeah. And the army doesn't exist everywhere.
They control a large part of your country.
No, they took every part. They went to every part where there's no army in it, and the army go to clean, to get rid of them. They don't go and attack the army in area where the army occupied that area and took it from it. It's completely different. It's not correct, or it's not precise what you're talking about. So it's completely different. The army, what the army is doing is clean those areas, and the indication that the army is strong, that is making advancement in that area. He never went to one area and couldn't enter to it. That's the indication. How could that army do that if he's a family army or a sect army? What about the rest of the country who support the government? It's not realistic. It doesn't happen. Otherwise, the whole country will collapse.
One small point about American involvement here. The president has gotten significant criticism because he has not supported the rebels more. As you know, there was an argument within his own councils from Secretary of State Clinton, from CIA Director David Petraeus, from the Defense Department, Leon Panetta, Secretary of Defense, and others, that they should have helped the rebels 2 years ago and we would be in a very different place. So the president has not given enough support to the rebels in the view of many people. And there's criticism that when he made a recent decision to give support, it has not gotten to the rebels because they worry about the composition.
If the American administration wanted to support al-Qaeda, go ahead. That's what we have to tell them. Go ahead and support al-Qaeda. But don't talk about rebels and Free Syrian Army and so on. The majority of fighters now are al-Qaeda. If you want to support them, you are supporting al-Qaeda. You are creating havoc in the region. And if this region is not stable, the whole world cannot be stable.
With respect, sir, most people don't believe the majority of the forces are al-Qaeda. Yes, there's a number of people who are al-Qaeda affiliates and who are here who subscribe to the principles of al-Qaeda. But that's not the majority of the forces, as you know. I mean, you know that the composition differs within the regions of Syria as to the forces that are fighting against your regime.
The American officers should learn to deal with reality. Why did the United States fail in most of its wars? Because it always based its war on the wrong information. So whether they believe or not, this is not reality. I have to be very clear and very honest. I'm not asking them to believe if they don't want to believe. This is the reality. I'm telling you the reality from our country. We live here. We know what's happening. And they have to listen to people who live here. They cannot listen only to their media or to their research centers. They don't live here. No one lives here but us. So this is the reality. If they want to believe, that's good. That will help them understanding the region and being more successful in their policies.
Many people think this is not a sustainable position here, that this war it cannot continue because the cost for Syria is too high. Too many deaths, 100,000 and counting, too many refugees, too much destruction. Yeah. The soul of a country at risk. If it was for the good of the country, would you step down?
That depends on the relation between me staying in this position and the conflict. We cannot discuss it just to say you have to step down. To step down, why? And what the expected result? This is first. Second, when you're in the middle of a storm, leaving your country just because you have to leave without any reasonable reason, it means you're quitting your country, and this is treason. So
It would be, you're saying it would be treason for you to step down right now because of your obligation to the country.
Unless the public wants you to quit.
And how will you determine that?
By the 2.5 years with the standing, without the public support, we cannot. We cannot withstand 2.5 years. Look at the other countries. Look what happened in Libya and Tunisia and Egypt.
Do you worry about that? What happened to Gaddafi? What happened to...
No, we are worrying that the rebels are taking control in many countries. And look at the results now. Are you satisfied as American with the results? Nothing. Very bad. Nothing good.
There was a report recently that you had talked about, or someone representing you had talked about some kind of deal in which you and your family would leave the country if you were guaranteed safe passage, if you were guaranteed there would be no criminal prosecution. Mm-hmm. You're aware of these reports?
Yeah. We have this guarantee from the first day of the crisis.
Because of the way you've acted?
No, because the agenda that I talked about, some of these agendas wanted me to quit. Very simply. So they said, we have all the guarantees if you want to leave, and all the money and everything you want. Of course, you just ignore that.
So you've been offered that opportunity?
Yeah, but it's not about me again. It's not my fight. It's not the fight of the government. It's the fight of the country, of the Syrian people. That's how we look at it. It's not about me.
It's not about you.
It's about every Syrian.
What, in the end, what's the end game?
Okay, of this war.
Yes.
It's very simple. When the Western countries stop supporting those terrorists and making pressure on their puppets country and client states like Saudi Arabia and Turkey and others, you will have no problem in Syria. It will be solved easily because those fighters, the Syrian part that you're talking about, lost its natural incubators in the Syrian society. They don't have incubator anymore. That's why they have incubator abroad. They need money from abroad. They need the moral support and political support from abroad because they don't have any grassroots, any incubator. So when you stop this smuggling, we don't have problems.
Yeah, but at the same time, as I've said before, you have support from abroad. There are those who say you would not be able to survive without the support of Russia and Iran.
No, it's not me. I don't have support.
Your government would not be able to support.
Not me. All Syria.
Survive.
Every agreement is between every class and every sector in Syria. Government, people, trade, military, culture, everything. It's like the cooperation between your country and any other country in the world. It's the same cooperation. It's not about me. It's not support for the crisis.
I mean about your government.
Yeah.
You say that the rebels only survive because they have support from Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the United States and Qatar, perhaps.
The difference.
And I'm saying that they say you only survive because you have the support of Russia and Iran and Hezbollah.
The external support can never substitute internal support. Can never. For sure. And the example that you have to look at very well, Egypt and Tunisia. They have all the support from the West and from the Gulf and from the most of the countries in the world. When they don't have support within their country, they couldn't continue more than how many weeks? 3 weeks. So the only reason we stand here for 2.5 years because we have internal support, public support. So any external support, if you want to call it support, let's use this word, it's going to be additional, but it's not based to depend on more than the Syrian support.
You and I have talked about this before. We remember Hama and your father, Hafez al-Assad. He ruthlessly set out to eliminate the Muslim Brotherhood. Are you simply being your father's son here?
I don't know what you mean by ruthlessly. Because
you know what happened at Hama?
I've never heard a soft war. Have you heard about soft war? There's no soft war. War is a war. Any war is ruthless. And when you fight terrorists, you fight them like any other war.
So the lessons you have here are the lessons you've learned from your father and what he did in Hama, which it is said and influenced you greatly.
It said what? Sorry?
It is said that what your father did
Yeah.
at Hama
Mm-hmm.
influenced you greatly in terms of your understanding of
Yeah.
what you have to do.
The question, what would you do as American if the terrorists invading your country from different areas and started killing tens of thousands
You
of
keep saying
Americans?
he's a terrorist, but in fact it is a popular revolution, people
No.
believe, against you that was part of the Arab Spring that influenced so
Yeah.
many other countries.
Revolution should be Syrian, cannot be revolution imported from abroad.
But it didn't
Revolution
start from abroad. It started here.
Yeah, those people that started here, they support the government now against those rebels. That's what you don't know. You don't know as an American, you don't know as a reporter. That's why talking about what happened at the very beginning is completely different from what's happening now. It's not the same. There's very high dynamic things are changing on daily basis. So it's completely different image. Those people, though, who wanted revolution, they are cooperating with us.
I'm asking you again, is it in fact you being your father's son and you believe that the only way to drive out people is to eliminate them the same way your father did?
In being independent, yes. In fighting terrorism, yes. In defending the Syrian people and the country, yes.
When I first interviewed you, there was talk of Bashar al-Assad. He's the hope. He's the reformer. That's not what they say anymore.
Who?
People who write about you, people who talk about you, people who analyze Syria and your regime.
Exactly. So the hope for American is different from the hope of Syrian. For me, I should be the hope of the Syrian, not any other one, not American, neither American, neither French or anyone in the world. I'm president to help Syrian people. So this question should start from the hope of the Syrian people. And if there's any change regarding that hope, we should ask the Syrian people, not anyone else in the world.
But now they say, their words, a butcher. Comparisons to the worst dictators ever to walk on the face of the earth, comparing you to them. Using weapons that go beyond warfare. Everything they could say bad about a dictator, they're now saying about you.
First of all, when you have a doctor who cut the leg to prevent the patient from the gangrene, if you have to, we don't call him butcher, we call him a doctor. And we thank him for saving the lives. When you have terrorism, you have war. When you have war, you always have innocent lives that could be the victim of any war. So you cannot talk about. We don't have to discuss what the image in the West before discussing the image within Syria. That's the question.
It's just not the West. I mean, it's the East and it's the Middle East, and I mean, the eyes of the world have been on Syria. We have seen atrocities on both sides, but on your side as well. They have seen brutality by a dictator that they say
so we have
puts you in a category with the worst.
Yeah. So we have to allow the terrorists to come and kill the Syrians and destroy the country much, much more. This is where you can be a good president. That's what you imply.
But you can't allow the idea that there is opposition to your government from within Syria. That is not possible for you to imagine.
To imagine that we have opposition?
Yes.
We have it, and you can go and meet with them. We have some of them within the government, we have some of them outside the government. They are opposition. We have it.
But those are the people who've been fighting against you.
Opposition is different from terrorism. Opposition is a political movement. Opposition doesn't mean to take armament and kill people and destroy everything. Do you call the people in Los Angeles in the 90s, do you call them rebels or opposition? What would the British call the rebels less than 2 years ago in London? Did they call them opposition or rebels? Why should we call them opposition? They are rebels. They are not rebels even, they are terrorists. They are beheading is opposing country or government by beheading, by barbecuing head, by eating the hearts of your victim. Is that opposition? What do you call the people who attacked the 2011th of September? Opposition? Even if they're not American, I know this. But some of them, they have, I think, nationality. I think one of them has American nationality. Do you call him opposition or terrorist? Why should you use a term in the United States and England and maybe other countries and use another term in Syria? This is double standard that we don't accept.
I once asked you what you feared the most, and you said the end of Syria as a secular state.
Yeah.
Is that end already here?
According to what we've been seeing recently in the area where the terrorists control, where they ban people from going to schools, ban young men from shaving their beards, and women have to wear, to be covered from top to toes, from head to toes. And let's say, in brief, they leave the Taliban style in Afghanistan, completely the same style. With the time, yes, we can be worried because the secular state should reflect secular society. And this secular society, with the time, if you don't get rid of those terrorists and this extremism and the Wahhabi style, of course it will influence at least the new and the coming generations. So and we don't say that we don't have it, we're still secular in Syria. But with the time, this secularism will be eroding.
Mr. President, thank you for allowing us to have a conversation about Syria and in war that is within, as well as the future of the country. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to Syria.